Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. Today we're going to turn a two-piece traditional coffee scoop, and we're going to do it without the use of a scroll chuck. Now, scroll chuck is nice, makes things a little bit faster and easier, but if you don't have one, we're still able to do it. And we're starting right now. Start with the wood. It needs to be dry. I prefer contrasting wood, but if you prefer something more boring, that's okay. But so either a dark bowl and a light handle, or a light bowl and a dark handle. Both work. Now, how we're going to chuck it, let me show you. Basically, we're going to use a glue block. And when we finish to reverse turning the bowl, we're going to use we're going to take this scrap of pine and use that to make a jam chuck, which is a really handy technique. So, basically, you're going to take your faceplate, which comes with every lathe, and put you a piece of flat wood. It could be plywood, could be any type of hardwood, and that'll work fine because that's just going to be something that we're going to glue the blank onto. Now, how are we going to glue the blank? Well, there's several different techniques. Number one, you could simply use carpenter's glue and a piece of paper and use a old traditional glue joint that easily separates at the end. And if you want to see a video where I used carpenter's glue and a paper joint, you can click on this video above. The other technique is to use a hot glue gun, but you're not going to use a craft glue gun. You're going to use something with a little more juice, something maybe around 100 watts or so like this. If you're interested in using a hot glue gun, I've got a video. You can click on the link above. But I'm going to use one of my favorite techniques, and that's basically using Woodturner's double-side tape. Now, you don't use any type of tape. You don't use carpenter's tape. This is a specialized, very thick, very, very strong. This one is made by Spec Tape. You can get it from Woodcraft. This came from Woodcraft 15 years ago, and I'm still using it because it's like 36 yards. You're only going to use a couple of inches. So do the math. It'll last you a long, long time, as shown by the fact that I've still got this much left over. The other glue that works well is medium CA glue, and use a little bit of accelerator. I would use the glue on the block itself and use the accelerator on the blank. This is a little bit messier to clean up sometimes, but it does work very well. It's a very strong, effective solution. Okay, I'm not sure if I mentioned the size of the block of wood. I would make them 1 3/4 to 2 inches square, and about I think an inch and a half or so long if you're using a glue block. If you're going to put it in a chuck, you can make them a little longer to put a tenon on it. I used a compass and drew some concentric circles to make it a little easier to get that squared up. And then I'm going to take about an inch and a 2-inch piece, long enough to fit that. Let's set that. And put it on this side. Now, the trick for a really strong glue hold here, and actually I got a little bit more than I need, so I'm just going to whack that off, is, and the trick to getting the backing off is if you use a knife and just cut a little seam. It's a whole lot easier to get it off than it is trying to find that corner and peeling it off. The key is to clamp it. So I'm using those concentric circles to kind of roughly center this thing. Clamp it for maybe 10 minutes or so, and that just gives you an awesome strength. And then for the handles, I would say, a piece, maybe 7 or 8 inches long would be plenty. Some people like longer scoops so they can reach into the bottom of the can. Some people like shorter handles so they'll fit inside the can and store it with the coffee. So, one size does not fit all. I think you can see one of the challenges we have is to get a nice friction fit when we go to turn the handle. And I'm not sure I told you how thick the handle was. About 3/4 of an inch piece of wood. You can see that on the typical live center, you're going to have to really embed this thing. It's going to be like a splitting wedge. Same thing over here. You got these big edges. You're going to have to, turn. Don't turn too close to it, but we're not going to turn too close to it anyway. And it makes no difference whether you've got a jet drive center with 4 spurs. You're going to have that same issue, the spike sticking out a ways. And on very brittle wood, such as a piece of ebony, it will, or other exotics, it will have a tendency to split if you try to put a wedge in it. If you have a sorbie type of step center, it might be a little bit large for the wood. I had a smaller one, but it disappeared. It would have worked fine. But I picked up recently at the Chattahoochee Symposium, this from Planet Retour, I picked up a very nice one that the spurs and the point are at about the same level, so this is not going to split. So this will work great on something like this. But I think you can get that from the walnut log if you're interested. But here's how I would solve that issue. I would simply take a drill with an appropriate sized drill bit, maybe 3/32 of an inch, and just drill a tiny little hole. Don't go very deep, just enough to handle that point. Now when you get it back in there, you should be able to crank it down without the risk, or at least is not as much risk of splitting. Maybe I'd need a larger hole here, but it looks like even though it's wedging a little bit, I think that would be fine. This seems to, I think this will hold it. Speed is going to be your friend, but drill an appropriate size hole to embed those points. Drawing the circles was a good idea, but it didn't work especially well. So I marked the center of this blank, and I'm going to actually get it centered using the live center, and that's probably going to work a little bit better. And then actually I can use the live center to bring up the pressure instead of a clamp, and let it sit for 10 minutes, and then we'll be back. Typically on a project this small, I might turn this on my little 12-inch Laguna teaching lathe. By the way, I do teach classes in my shop. If you're in the Atlanta area or you're visiting Atlanta area, contact me, information on my website. So we're going to turn this around. I'm going to leave tailstock support up here as long as possible. I'm wearing eye protection. So I'm using a 3/8" spindle gouge. It is fairly small. I got my tool rest a little bit higher than usual while I start this rounding process. Now that I've knocked the corners off, I can get this a little bit closer. Notice I always turn the lathe off. Bad things happen if you keep the lathe running while you're moving the banjo. And I'm coming in with the side, almost like a skew. I'm rolling this thing over, anchoring the tool right to bevel. And just using the edge as very similar to a skew. Get this round. Almost there. It's a 3/8" spindle gouge. It's about perfect for this size project. This is a piece of maple. I'm going to kind of knock the edges off a little bit. Kind of like somewhat of an edge of a bead. Now we're going to hollow it. Don't be tempted to try to hollow something like this with a Forstner bit. End grain is tough. You still got the divot at the bottom to deal with, so we're going to do it the more traditional way. We could drill a depth hole. Never a bad idea. I use a hand-mounted drill, and I have little notches cut, so I know about how deep to go. Slow the speed down a little bit, and I brace myself. I just push it in. Bring up the tool rest. And remove the live center here so I don't get turner's elbow. Alright, we're going to use a traditional approach. We're going to come in from the inside to the outside. And kind of a scraping cut. This one's just a little bit deeper than that one, and that's fine. We get the speed up a little bit. Just come in and just kind of a scraping cut. Hot shaving. Just slowly sweep it with the flute somewhere around maybe 10 o'clock, 10:30. Okay, just about got rid of the divot. So now I'm going to come in there. I'm going to use a negative rake scraper to kind of clean up the inside. Okay, I said we were going to use a negative rake scraper. A negative rake scraper, that is one with a bevel on both sides, similar to this, is a great idea. You can use a conventional scraper if you got a starter tool set. Might come with a little small round nose scraper, and that'll work fine. Just make sure that your handle is higher than the scraping edge. And ease it in, take light cuts. And roll it up a little bit. Got it? Pretty smooth. I could use a scraper or I could use the side of that spindle gouge, but I want to soften that edge just a little bit. Round it over a little bit by just a rubbing scrape. Whoa! Got sloppy, got too much steel in there. Oh, that did a job on it. Let's clean that up. It happens. Fortunately, this was a little bit longer than I needed, so I think I can probably clean that up. By just taking it down a little bit. Ride the bevel. That entry cut is tough. Alright, let's go cut from the outside across. I want to put a slight chamfer on the edge anyway. Okay, all that damage is done. It's fixed. All right, now I want to go ahead and round over the outside here just a little bit. Anchor the tool, ride the bevel, lift the handle to the cut. I'm going to round over this side just a little bit. Soften that edge a little bit. So now I'm going to sand the inside and outside before I take it off. And I'm going to go through the different grits, starting with 120. Well, I almost forgot. We need to go ahead and drill a 1/4-inch hole for the handle. So I find the pattern to be even on both sides and find something on the end that looks good. I'm going to put this at a very slight angle. I'm just going to mark it here with an awl. And then using an electric drill. I'm using a brad point because it's easier for me to get that thing located. And I'm going to hold this thing and just kind of center it. Put it on drilling speed rather than screwdriver speed. And I should have done this earlier because we're going to get a little blowout. I'll have to sand. Do that before you do the final finishing and sanding on the inside. Just for variety, we're going to show a little different glue technique for the glue block, which we have to mount on here. I'm just going to put a little accelerator on here. Don't spray that anywhere near your CA glue. And then we're going to take some medium CA. Now, I've already gotten this glue block rounded between centers, although they're not marked real well. Just put a nice bead around the edge. That's where most of the holding area is coming from the edge. I don't need to worry too much about getting much of it on the center. Alright, got this. Already got my center hole on here. Just going to bring it in. Banjo out of the way. And just push it up against there. And again, we're going to fasten it down like that. Certainly doesn't hurt to put a little extra bead around the edge. Well, I was telling you we were going to make the insides parallel, but I don't know what I was thinking. We're going to make the outside parallel because I want this to go into a recess. So we're going to mark, I've measured that. We're going to just roughly mark, well, obviously everything looks off, but it doesn't make any difference if this is not in there perfectly round or not, because the center is going to be round. So we're just going to mark this, just touching this side, not the other side, or it's all will flick around and hit you in the throat. And there we go. Now we're just going to hollow that out. I've waited about 10 minutes for this glue to dry. Get this live center out of the way. And again, I'll do the initial hollowing with the spindle gouge, and then we'll clean it up with a some type of scraper. So we'll get the speed going up a little bit here. This is pine. You want a soft wood so it won't scar or mar the wood. Okay, now I'm going to use some type of square wall scraper. Again, I'm going to use this speeding and parting tool just because it's handy. Actually, a square edge scraper would be even better. I'm going to use this negative rake square edge scraper, Cindy Droza style, which I recently reground from another old Craftsman that I picked up somewhere. So we're just going to go straight down. Just changing the edge there a little bit. And let's give it a trial fit. Almost. Make it just a little bit bigger. You want about a 3-degree slope coming in, similar to your Morse taper. Okay, well, a little bit too loose. All that means is I got to go a little bit deeper on that angle. That's running pretty true. Now, how true? Well, let's see if I keep from getting it wedged loose. One solution, and probably not a bad one, is to bring up a support, but you don't want a point. You want to use what I call a soft touch, something with a little wood or maybe perhaps plastic on the end like I've made here, just to give it a little additional support while we round over the bottom. And we're just going to round over the bottom. Get the speed up a little bit. And now I've got a nice round over. And we're just going to sand that bottom off. And you can see that really didn't do any damage. Slow the speed down a little bit. Using jam chucks is just a great technique. Not having a scroll chuck for a while is not a bad idea because it teaches you some good craft techniques that they've used for many years before scroll chucks became commonly available for the wood turning community in the early 80s. Before that, they were just priced out of most people's reach. Okay, so I drilled a small hole here. I used an awl for the tiny little hole I need on this end. And we're just going to create a bit of a taper. I'm going to make a pretty simple handle. We're going to turn this at pretty high speed, a couple of thousand, almost like turning a pin. Careful on this end. This plank started out 7/8 of an inch, so it's a little on the thick side for a handle. My final handle thickness might be 5/8 of an inch. Just a nice taper. Pressing too hard, so I'm getting a little chatter. Okay. Now, I'm going to put a tenon on this end with a little bit of a bead behind it with a little scrap to remove that damage where the hole is. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark where that damage is. I'm just taking this down a little bit. Without me doing it left-handed, which is a bit of a challenge. Okay, now we're going to put a little bit of a bead here on the end. So using the 3/8 inch spindle gouge, I've shaped a bead. I'm going to come in here. I lost a little footage there, fortunately. to the skew to do a little cleanup here. A slight pressure on the other side. Okay, we'll go ahead and sand that up and then we'll part it off. Okay, I sanded through all the grits up through 600. I used a little Yorkshire grit to polish it, and now I'm going to start taking down the ends a little bit. This is probably the trickiest part, not going too far. I want that little bit of protrusion. And let me measure that. Just a hair more than 1/4 of an inch. So I don't want to go any further into that. That one's ready to part off. Now on this end, just going to start tapering this down. Before I take it off, though, I think I want to finish sanding up that little part right there. So let's speed them going about 1,000. And that's off on that end. And let's see if I can. Well, it wasn't driving it anymore on this other end, so I'll have to cut that off with a knife. Okay, shined really well. I say a knife. The skew is pretty sharp, so let's just. Actually, I'm just going to use this flush cut saw. There we go. And now we'll sand off the end of that by hand. And a little glue, and there we are.